Stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
After nearly 4 decades of March Madness, this sports broadcasting legend is stepping away from his role in covering the NCAA basketball tournament. Jim Nantz on his fondest memories and what's next when we go personal.
What Kevin McCarthy put on the table is a tremendous opportunity for us to have a good negotiation.
We're headed to a financial train wreck if we're not already there. So it's not okay just to raise the debt ceiling for the sake of raising the debt ceiling.
It's a plan that disinvests in America and rolls back progress we've made on so many fronts.
We've been very, very clear. We need to make sure that we avoid default.
We fight the woke in the schools. We fight the woke in the legislature. We fight the woke in the corporations. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob.
Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Thank you for joining us. President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy are still at odds when it comes to raising the debt limit. McCarthy unveiled a plan yesterday to raise the debt limit and cut government spending, with a vote expected next week. But the White House claims the proposal would slash key programs and cut manufacturing. The speaker still needs to unite House Republicans behind his plan, with multiple lawmakers still making up their minds. For more on this developing story, Scott MacFarlane and Nancy Cordes join us now. Scott is a CBS News congressional correspondent. Nancy is CBS News' chief White House correspondent. Nancy, let's begin with you and listen first to what Karine Jean-Pierre had to say today at the briefing.
Sounds like you're saying that there's a possibility that the president won't sit down with the House Speaker.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying we're looking closely at the proposal that they put forward. We're going to analyze the impact of the 22% spending cuts that they put forward. But what we are saying at the same time, look, I don't have a meeting to announce, but we've been very, very clear. We need to make sure that we avoid default.
Nancy, for those of us who don't live in the briefing room or seem to, like you're working so hard, what's your read on what she's trying to say? What's the real state of play in terms of a possible meeting between the speaker and the president?
Right. Well, what's so interesting, Robert, is what she's not saying. Back at the start of this debate, President Biden said that he would be willing to sit down with Speaker McCarthy and talk about spending only after McCarthy basically put his cards on the table and put his budget out and put some numbers to what he was asking for, be concrete about what kinds of cuts he wanted to make. Well, now Speaker McCarthy has done that. He has released this bill calling for all kinds of cuts, calling for rolling back some of the president's signature legislation that he was able to pass just last year. And now the White House still isn't committing to that meeting with Speaker McCarthy. They say they're still analyzing McCarthy's bill, even as they're very out front about attacking it in all kinds of ways. The reality here, Robert, what's going on is that the White House and Democrats are highly skeptical at this point that McCarthy's actually going to be able to pass this bill. He would need to keep essentially his entire conference together. He can only afford to lose a couple of Republicans because the margin is so tight in the House. They're gambling that he's not going to be able to do that because there will be Republicans who defect for all kinds of reasons, and they think he'll be in a weaker negotiating position once they're able to prove that he can't keep his own party together. So they're holding off scheduling any kind of meeting with him for now.
So they are in a wait-and-see mode, seeing how those House Republicans are responding. Scott, let's first listen to what some of those House Republicans had to say today.
I don't see a plan to balance the budget over the next decade. That gives me a little bit of heartburn. This is an opportunity to show the country that we can lead on fiscal responsibility.
Would I like a whole lot more cuts? Yes. I'm a realist. We have to get the 218 votes. But it's a step in the right direction, and we'll continue on with it.
But we can't allow America to default. That would hurt people's retirement, that would hurt people's 401ks, that would hurt everybody, but we have to get something out of it. And so, you know, I'm looking at it right now, I'm pretty much a lean yes.
Scott, it seems like they're debating a bill that will ultimately fail because it's very unlikely the Democratic Senate is going to take any initial plan by the House GOP as the final agreement.
Oh, it's going to fail. It's about 300 pages long and nobody's seen it yet. But we know it's going to fail. But let's look at what Kevin McCarthy has done here, Bob. He's done something that's actually been quite elusive in past years. He's got members of the Freedom Caucus, the farther right members of his conference, willing to vote to raise the debt ceiling. That includes members who've never voted to raise the debt ceiling before in any context, in any administration. Now he's got to work on getting moderates on board. There's a belief that if he can do that, if he can get this to 218 votes somehow, some way, he gives himself leverage to leverage President Biden to some type of table and some type of talk. If this thing collapses next week, if this Wednesday vote becomes a Thursday vote, becomes a Friday vote, becomes a vote that is evaporated off the calendar, he risks losing whatever leverage exists. Now, we've been talking to members all day about this, Republicans and Democrats. That dynamic is different. One other dynamic is just the same. They disagree even on the impact of not raising the debt ceiling or the standoff that is about to ensue as we get close to this X date. Let's listen first from one of those Freedom Caucus members, Andy Harris, and then the Democratic response. You're not concerned about impacts to the economy between now and whatever date this is solved?
Not at all. I think the president is going to come to his senses on this. I think he's going to realize that the American public, look, we've seen the polling. The majority of the American public do believe that you should, and it's the same way they deal with it in their family. You have a teenager who spends too much on the credit card. You don't just raise the credit card limit, you curtail your teenager's spending.
And to jeopardize that in any way, shape, or form is really going to roil bond markets and could affect the pocketbooks and family finances of everybody in America.
Still doesn't sound like the two sides are talking to each other or speaking the same language. But, Bob, let me underscore the significance of Andy Harris from Maryland. He's one of those Republicans indicating he'll vote for this debt ceiling bill and has never once in his career voted to raise the debt ceiling at all.
Okay, so let's say McCarthy gets the votes together. The Speaker gets a bill passed through the House of Representatives narrowly. That includes an extension of the debt limit as well as some outline spending cuts. Nancy, President Biden keeps saying he wants a clean debt limit extension. Based on your report and your conversations with White House officials, is there any chance, any at all, that this president would ever accept a deal on a debt limit hike that also includes spending cuts?
I think there's always that chance, especially because as hard of a line as the White House has taken for months, they realize that a default would be catastrophic and it would be a PR nightmare as well if Republicans were able to say, well, we wanted to sit down and talk, and the White House said no. Right now, they're doing everything they can to make the case that it's the Republicans who are recalcitrant, the Republicans who are trying to create a criteria for raising the debt ceiling, even though they haven't done that. The last couple times the debt ceiling needed to be lifted during the Trump administration. And they think that that is a powerful strategy for now. But if we really get into an economic crisis at some point, they're obviously going to have to shift strategies. They just don't want to have to do it any sooner than they absolutely have to. Beyond that, it's really difficult to see what the middle ground would be between where the White House stands right now and some of these cuts that Speaker McCarthy wants to make. So that is a very complicated negotiation. Even if they're able to hit on a number, again, there's no guarantee that House Republicans would go along with it. So there are a number of major stumbling blocks ahead as we watch this shifting landscape and try to figure out how the debt ceiling is going to get raised in time to avert a default.
Scott McFarland and Nancy Cordes, as always, on top of the story. We really appreciate it. And the fight over the debt ceiling in the House is one of the first big tests for Speaker McCarthy and his narrow majority. We'll talk to a House Republican about whether McCarthy has those votes next. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way day to day. That first draft of history, it happens right here.
CBS Mornings. An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, oh, we're going to tell you about that too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We go to stories because we can bring someone to that story. That human connection is incredibly important. The news doesn't have to be depressing.
What do you love about running? Energy! Energy!
It can be uplifting.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. Reaction continues to pour in on Speaker McCarthy's debt limit plan. And while the White House has pushed back against it, many House Republicans are voicing support for the proposal that could be voted on as early as next week. Arkansas Republican Congressman Steve Womack joins us now. He sits on the House Appropriations Committee. Congressman, thanks for taking the time. Where does the debt limit stand inside the House GOP?
Well, we've put our proposal forward, but the bigger answer is we hit the debt ceiling some months ago, and here we are with extraordinary measures needing to find a path forward to get the debt ceiling raised, and that's going to require the work of the House and the Senate. But the House yesterday put its proposal together its purpose in doing several things. But more than anything, besides lifting the debt ceiling, it's sending a signal to the American public that we are serious about stopping the digging of the hole that we happen to be in right now of $32 trillion. So we offered our proposal yesterday. We'll probably vote on it next week. And once it clears the House and gets to the Senate, then the negotiations can then begin.
What about Speaker McCarthy's plan? Can he count on your vote all the way?
Oh, he's got my vote. And look, he's got the vote, I think, of the clear majority of our conference. And frankly, I'd be surprised if we don't have 218 votes to be able to push this through the House next week. I think the Speaker has props to Kevin. He's done a great job in cobbling together the fractious GOP and taking the best ideas from everybody, knowing that at the end of the day, we have to do something on behalf of the American public, or we're headed to a financial train wreck if we're not already there. So it's not okay just to raise the debt ceiling for the sake of raising the debt ceiling. because all you do when you raise the debt ceiling is you just kick forward, punt the tough decisions that are going to have to be made. So we're proposing some of those tough decisions right now.
But do you acknowledge that at some point this is going to all have to be redone, because there is a Democratic Senate and they're going to likely reject whatever comes out of the Republican House?
Look, we're not naive. We're under no illusion that everything that we have proffered to this point is going to be signed into law and everybody's going to be happy again. But we do need a basis for negotiations. And it is just the president has said he wants a clean debt ceiling. I know Senator Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate want a clean debt ceiling. My friends on the other side of the aisle in the House want a clean debt ceiling. But that is just simply not a responsible way forward. We have a problem. We're $32 trillion in debt. We're spending more than we take in. And even the proposals that we've offered will not be sufficient to keep us from having to revisit these issues in the future. But I think signaling to America that we're serious about stopping the madness here, the insanity of over and over again outspending our income, is just simply unacceptable.
You have a real concern, clearly, about federal spending, but what about if those discussions went on a separate track, on a budgetary track, and the debt limit was extended cleanly? Would you be open to just having these kind of spending discussions in a separate realm, not part of the debt limit?
Well, we have to have that discussion. We have to have that negotiation. Whether or not I would be in favor of something like that is problematic because, first of all, that has to be the only available option. I don't think that's the only available option. I think there is an option out there that we could coalesce around. The GOP in the House has put forward a proposal, but whether or not it's going to involve the clawback of the IRS money or, canceling student loan forgiveness, capping discretionary spending at 1% a year for the next 10 years, I mean, those are all things that we have put on paper and said this is where we're willing to negotiate. We think those are good faith negotiation topics. We think and they poll well with the American public. So, look, I just think we need to have the conversation. We do know, and I fully expect that what we send to the Senate, when it comes back to us, it will change. How much it changes and whether those changes will be sufficient to continue to get my vote, will be determined.
Congressman, I haven't heard two words out of you today: Medicare, Social Security. You're on the Appropriations Committee. You know that those are major issues when it comes to long-term federal spending. Should they be on the table? You keep talking about spending. Should they be on the table in these discussions?
Well, eventually they're going to have to be on the table. But let me be careful to say that putting something like that, and what you're talking about is entitlement spending, putting the mandatory side of the spending ledger, which is 70% of spending in the federal government, is going to have to be addressed because the size and scope of the deficit and the debt is just too large for us to be able to manage only by dealing with discretionary spending, which is what appropriators do. But I'm also the former chairman of the House Budget Committee, so I have a pretty good working knowledge of where the major drivers of the deficit and the debt are. And so when we talk about putting those items on the table, what I talk about is we need to strengthen those programs. Americans rely on those programs. We need to be able to have a full-throated, adult-level discussion about what we can do to strengthen Medicare and Social Security, because if we don't...
When, Congressman, when?
Now. It's kind of like planting a tree. When's the best time to plant a tree, Bob?
So it's part of the debt limit discussions?
Today.
Part of
it's not going to be part of the debt limit discussions because we've taken those issues off the table. But you've asked me if I think they need to come back into the discussion, and they will eventually have to, because you just can't cut enough discretionary spending to balance the books of the federal government. So this is going to be Groundhog Day for us over and over again. So when I say Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, add net interest on the debt to this issue, because that's all mandatory spending, we have to address those if we're going to sustain those programs. And let me just say one more thing about it. If we don't, those programs are going to get cut on their own because the trust funds are running out of money.
Final question, a political one. You know this House Republican conference as well as anyone. If at the end of the day, Speaker McCarthy is forced to bring a clean debt limit extension to the floor, is his speakership safe in that scenario?
It's a hard question to answer because, as you know, we have the ability to do a motion to vacate with one member. We've got a 4-seat majority. I would just say, as I said earlier, I think Kevin McCarthy's done a great job in putting this conference together on a package that we can agree to. Now, when it comes back, if it comes back as a clean debt ceiling, people in the House GOP are not going to vote for it, and I don't think Kevin McCarthy is going to recommend that they vote for it. We don't want to mess around with the full faith and credit of our country, but at the end of the day, we have to stop the insanity of continuing to do what we've done that have gotten us to a $32 trillion debt.
Congressman, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Bob.
Governor Ron DeSantis is continuing his efforts on the cultural front. He made his first trip to South Carolina Wednesday and teased a potential entry into the 2024 presidential race. You're streaming Red and Blue.
An original documentary from CBS reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman. Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job? I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
We have no other recourse but to wage a war on woke. We fight the woke in the schools. We fight the woke in the legislature. We fight the woke in the corporations. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. That was Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in Spartanburg, South Carolina, coming as many in the Republican Party anticipate his possible entrance into a growing field, though not too fast, for the 2024 Republican nomination. Joining us is CBS News political director Finn Gomez. Finn, thanks for being here. Let's begin with a breaking story from the Washington Post just now that President Biden, as long expected, is moving toward running for re-election. He might take some kind of step next week. What are you hearing from Democratic sources? Is there real pressure for the president to get in soon?
Yeah, I just spoke to a Democratic source who did say that has been some rumblings about a potential video announcement of some sort, which has taken some by surprise, as a later timeline was expected by some. But yeah, there is a donor retreat. We have confirmed there's donors coming later next week. This could be tied into that. But there has been some movement within certain Democratic political circles surrounding the White House about a potential reelect announcement coming soon.
When you think about this race, it's not just about whether someone else is going to run against President Trump. It's also about President Biden's decision. And when I'm talking to sources among the Biden circle, they keep saying he wants to run, that he's healthy, and that, yes, a health issue could always flare up for anyone of that age. But at this point, he's leaning into it. He's been leaning into it in private. Let's turn to the Republican race, though. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie had this to say in recent days. Never mind. So he had a few things to say. He wanted to take on former President Trump directly.
Yeah, I was there when he was. And Christie did sound. I mean, he said he was going to take his time over the next couple of weeks before he makes a decision on 2024. He said he was going to make a decision by May.
Do you think he runs?
Yes, I do think he runs. I think he thinks there's space for him to run. I think He
said he doesn't want to be a paid assassin. He doesn't want to just be someone who's on stage taking on Trump.
I mean, true. I did ask him what would prevent him from running, and he said flat out, if I did not believe that I could run, but at the same time, listening to him and and talking to other Republicans, there is a belief that is a voice that is yet to be heard yet within the Republican presidential
But he's
primary.
close to Trump, but then now a Trump antagonist. It's an interesting political dynamic because he was clearly an ally of Trump for 4 years.
Right. I mean, there's. But that's so Trumpian, right? That's such a Trumpian narrative, like someone close, and then he kicks him out of his circle, and then he brings him back in. I mean, but Christie, as you know, has been very, very vocal about a potential
And there are the
race
candidates who are not even taking on Trump directly, like the potential candidate, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Right. You covered him this morning. He spoke at a Heritage Foundation event. Did he mention Trump by name ever?
That's the thing. Like he has been avoiding.
Did he mention Trump's name?
I did not hear him say, no, he did not.
Not once.
He did not mention Trump's name. It's more about this sort of sunny, optimistic perspective that he has, and like he thinks that can counter Trump, it can counter DeSantis, but he's been holding back, and you've seen that.
Was the room into it?
Yes. To a degree, yes.
Roaring on their feet.
There was
golf clap.
They were a little bit louder than a golf clap. Maybe like
enthusiastic.
There was enthusiasm for that. I think there is a space for something like that. Optimistic.
Well, if there's going to be any space for a Senator Tim Scott candidacy, it's going to be the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah,
that kind of traditional, conservative, slightly Trump-aligned.
Right. Exactly. And and it was here in Washington or the Washington area, right? So that he's going back to Iowa this weekend. We'll see how he does there. He did, coming out of the gates, he did make some missteps on the abortion issue, as we saw when Caitlin Huey Burns interviewed him. I think, and I think there's some adjustments he has to make there. But he's trying to find his space in this early stage.
Back to the Biden story. He does have a challenger now for the Democratic nomination, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Let's hear a bit of what he had to say this week.
My mission over the next 18 months of this campaign and throughout my presidency will be to end the corrupt merger of state and corporate power.
I saw something interesting today on the web that former Congressman Ron Paul was offering some supportive words of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So Kennedy's clearly trying to mount an outsider campaign, well known for being very anti-Dr. Anthony Fauci, being anti-vax. He seems to get a little traction in some of these initial polls, though you never know with these quick polls when someone gets in. Are Democratic sources at a high level, close to the presidency, close to Biden, nervous?
No, flat out no. I did ask about that recent USA Today Suffolk poll to a senior Democrat who just told me essentially, anybody with the last name Kennedy is going to get that 14% of Biden 2020 voters. But no, there's no expected primary debates happening in the Democratic primary. There is no fear. What I've seen, what I've heard about a Kennedy Jr. candidacy.
Finn Gomez, the political director here at CBS News, always on the beat, always working the phone. Thanks for all of your work. And that does it for us here today at Red and Blue. You can stream us Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
In today's Money Watch, business analyst Jill Schlesinger is here to help.
How do you even begin to make the best use of your money?
If you've got a match from your employer,